Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature. Whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes, nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With All Trails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with All Trails.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Proudly sponsored by Kildare County Council.
I ran into the storms at the tribunals, and I mean I had to deal with those lovely people in the castle for 8 years. It was a tough time, and a tough time for Celia Larkin, who was my partner through it, and I feel I was very unfairly treated. I mean, my view is the tribunal had to get a big head after spending donkey's years.
What about that other big house? Áras an Uachtaráin.
Mary McAleese, can you believe that this is episode 19 of our first season of Changing Times? Just under 4 months when we kicked off. Imagine.
I know it's flown, Myriad. Remember sitting here for the first time, conversation with your nephew. Never did find out from Dermot Kennedy who his favourite auntie was, and wondering would anybody be listening to us at all.
Yeah, I know. And listen, they have. We've had very nice reaction, and thank you to all our listeners for being so kind and for your nice words. And for tuning in, really. It means so much to the both of us, doesn't it? And to all the team here behind the scenes, and our producer, Anne-Marie, our researcher, and our sponsor, Kildare County Council. But it's not quite our final episode.
No, next week we have, on the last show of the season, we're going to have a special episode. We record an awful lot of stuff with our guests, that so much that it's impossible to put all of it out in the episode. So next week, you'll hear some very interesting extra conversations taken from this season's recordings. Mm-hmm. And then we'll be taking a wee bit of a break and returning for season 2 in the autumn. Now, we have a very big announcement, Mary.
We do.
I'll let you do the honours.
Okay. Well, this is something I never thought I would be saying. I suppose it's more in Dermot's domain, I would have thought, but yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, actually, also my grandchildren's domain.
Yeah, in my case.
Yeah, let's drum roll.
Because, dear listeners, this summer we, Mary McAleese and me, Mary Kennedy, and our producer Enda, and the Changing Times Allenwood Conversations team will be at Electric Picnic.
There you go now. Bus past rock stars, the pair of us.
We can go down on the bus and use our cards.
Exactly, get our free travel, yes.
No, it's great, and we're both looking forward to it. We'll be there on the Sunday, the 18th of August, on the podcast stage in the Mindful Arena. It could be the Mindfield Arena, could it?
The Mindfield Arena.
It's going to be fantastic. So if you follow the Dundara Television Instagram page, you'll get all the details.
There's a lot of themes have come to the fore through the course of our conversations with a fantastic list of guests, and we've been through the mills of resilience and courage and compassion, empathy and leadership. And this county we're in, County Kildare, has its share of leaders in times past, no more so than the great St. Bridget, of course. And people may not realise this, but the great explorer Ernest Shackleton was also born here in Athayan, County Kildare. But today's guest has led our country, not once or twice, but 3 times. Bertie Ahern was undoubtedly the most popular politician of his day, perhaps at times somewhat controversial and occasionally accused of being a bit elusive. Though I'm not so sure about that because he turned up just about everywhere. But he is credited rightly, something that means a lot to me and a lot to a lot of people, for helping to deliver peace to Northern Ireland, as well as ushering in a more progressive, cosmopolitan, liberal state. And there's an awful lot to Bertie Ahern. We're going to hopefully find out more about that. Bertie, it's a pleasure to have you here in Allenwood. You're very welcome.
You're very welcome.
You're very much
I
to you
know
both.
that you've been probably in every nook and cranny in the country. Have you ever been to Allenwood before?
I've been in Allenwood, yeah. I've been on the trails. I know this part of Kildare very well because my sister has spent now nearly 55 years, I think, in Donaghadee.
Really?
They've been farming there for, well, our hubby is dead now, but she's still there, and they have the farm there. Her sons are running it now. She's battling on, but so I know this end well, and I'm driving through some of the villages this morning. I noticed a few of the pubs I was in over the years.
Do you know what's lovely about you, Bertie? You're a dub through and through, but your pedigree is from rural Ireland.
Yeah. All the blood is Cork.
Yeah.
My dad was from Balgooley, just outside Kinsale, and my mother is from Castle Donovan, which is just outside Bantry, and the people would hear listeners that know Skibbereen and Dreen and Drumalee, all that end of the country. So practically all my relations are Cork, because a few of my mother's brothers emigrated to London because of no work in Bantry. But most of them stayed in Cork, and then on my father's side, they all stayed in Cork. So my mum only had one sister that came to Dublin, lived in Cabra. She had a big family, but all the rest of the relations were in Cork. So we spent most of our summers going to see the country cousins, getting free holidays in those days.
The country has formed you.
You mentioned there about your sister still farming, because your background originally in Cork would have been farming, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and
your grandfather was a farmer.
Yeah, my dad was a farmer, and my dad ran the All Hallows College for the Vincentians for, well, he wasn't farm manager all this time, but he spent 50 years working there.
What brought him from Cork? Because would he not have inherited the family farm, given where he was in the family?
And he was the oldest. He was the oldest son. Yeah, but
he did he?
Well, I think he my dad had a checkered enough career. He was in and out of most prisons, not for anything that was I considered illegal, but for my dad was on the freedom fighter side.
Yeah.
He was in the old IRA, so he was in prisons in Cork, a few of them, and a few of them in Dublin and Tintown, and so so when he left, then he was going to.
Was he not going to go on for the priesthood?
Yeah, he thought about the priesthood, and I think he came up kind of for the preliminary thing, but he got out of that quick enough. But I think he went to Blackrock with the Vincentians. And I don't know how long. I think maybe only for the year kind of novice thing that you did. But he stayed with the Vincentians and came to All Hallows and worked with and with the Vincentians all his life. So we were very much brought up. In those days, All Hallows was the seminary for the foreign missions, of course, and across the road was the Vincentians St. Pat's College, which is far more famous, I suppose, for teaching generations of teachers. So we spent most of our life between All Hallows and Pat's, and I went to school in St. Pat's.
And what was life like growing up?
It was odd because
There were 5 of you, weren't there?
5 of us. One died, so it was 6 originally, but I have to always remember the one that was gone before me, John Joseph.
How old was John Joseph when John Joseph died?
Only maybe 5 or 6 months. It was a sore point with my dad because my dad felt he never should have died. But anyway, that was before my time. But we still go to every Christmas Day. Those of us who are around, we still go to the graveside. So
That's nice.
we still remember him. So I think he'd be 80 something now. So we were literally spent our lifetime in a farm. All Hallows that time had all the land around Drumcondra. They also had a farm out in North County Dublin, St Margaret's. So we spent our time, with the cows, with the calves, with the pigs. So we all had our chores in the farms, which we loved. And then we're living in the city. So
you were a hybrid. You were fabulous.
It was a very different life. But All Hallows that stage was fairly closed up. DCU run it now, the Dublin City University, but everyone is allowed to walk around, which is great. But at that time it was kind of closed society, but we were allowed to play there, and they had fantastic facilities. So for growing up, it was great. Once we did our farm chores, which my dad made sure we did, but it was a great life because they had horses.
So wonder you hadn't a career then in either the priesthood or agriculture.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I mean, I have very fond memories of all the priests, because they were all kind of teachers in those days, and it was a very all the students came from all over Ireland and from abroad. It was great, because the students were there at that time. There was forever, every day there was football matches. It was mainly Gaelic at that time, but they had good tennis facilities, good basketball facilities, and during the summer we were able to use all of those when they were gone. So it was a charmed society, and we couldn't, of course, other than that you had to do your chores, which was essential.
So you were steeped in but not just the farm, but you were steeped in the church because it was all around you. You still are you?
I am, yeah. I'm a believer and would be a strong Catholic. But you couldn't be otherwise living in what was known as the Holy Land, because wherever we were, I mean, there was the Franciscans on one side and the Carmelite nuns were on the other, and the Christian brothers who educated me, God love them. And, all of we'd Redemptorist nuns, and, everything around Drumcondra at that time was religious institution. And because my dad was in All Hallows, he knew the farmers and the fellows who were running the farms, and so we were in and out of all these places. So listen, unfortunately now, most of the religious are gone, and the land is gone, even worse still, because it's all built on.
And Bertie, what was school like for you?
Yeah, school. I went to Pat's Drumcondra. Pat's was great because it took me about 6 minutes from my door in Church Avenue to get to the school.
And was there talk of politics, say, around your kitchen table? Was there politics in the home?
Yeah, non-stop.
Okay.
And I was the youngest, so kind of was last to speak, and probably wasn't better off to speak, so you listened, because they were fairly heated debates. And the house was a Republican house. I mean, my father, obviously, and my mum hated the Brits and the Tans and royal families and everything. She was a tough woman, so it was that kind of a house. And my brothers, Morris and Nolan, weren't much behind her, I can tell you. So it was that kind of a house. And but when I went to Pat's, there was a by-election early on, and one of our teachers, not the teacher I had, a fellow called Stan O'Brien, he stood for Fianna Fáil in the area. So we were all out, Stan is our man, and delivering leaflets for Stan O'Brien. What age were you then? So I was 11, I think.
Oh, right.
11.
Started
so
early.
It was a good education into, and the party was very strong in the local area, as Fine Gael was at that stage. Mm-hmm. So we had it was politics. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was that the start of your political career, do you think?
Yeah, I think so, because you couldn't but dodge it. And then when we had a teacher in the school who lost actually to Paddy Belton in the by-election, the famous Belton family. Mm. And then after that, I remember the two TDs in the area in the mid-60s were George Colley and Charlie Haughey, two well-known figures at the time. And the chairman of the Common was from about 3 doors down from me. And in those days, the membership was very strong. It's not like nowadays, but it was very. And we were all kids, and we joined in. But our job was delivering leaflets, climbing poles, and putting up posters, and generally having fun. And I remember the '66 election. After the election, Charlie Haughey gave the chairman to come and the money to have a kids' party, which was a bright idea. And he called in on the party. Now, when I say the kids' party, nobody was of voting age. We were kids. So this was great. I mean, to get loads of sweets on a midweek party was important because there wasn't much money around those days.
Is that where the seeds were sown of your political ambition, Bertie?
Yeah, I think, you know, around the area at that time, there were a lot of young people had joined up, and you know, young boys and young girls, and it was Lorraine Bood, who was the daughter of the chairman. She got me to come to my first common meeting in Amon Street. And that night, 5 young people were on for their first meeting. So it's nowadays you wouldn't have 5 people in a common, but anyway, there were different days.
What age were you, Bertie?
I was 20.
Okay.
What age were you when you first were elected to the Dáil?
25, 77, so yeah, 25. I was to run the local election the previous year, but I was doing my exams and my mother had a seizure. The reason they were asking me to join, they needed a candidate in Drumcondra and they couldn't find anyone. So they were trying to get me to run. But anyway, I think it was a wise decision made because I wouldn't have won.
And your mum, she wanted you to get the career.
No, she wanted me to be finished. There was no question of it, and it wasn't worth the row because, you know.
And Bertie, at 25 years of age, when you're elected, do you have a vision, or can you remember what way you were thinking with regard to, I'm here now and this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I was interested in local activities. You know, I was playing football, I was playing soccer, I was playing Gaelic. You know, I was involved in the home farm, I was involved in the Gaelic club, and you know, knew a lot of the guys. So I was more interested in pitches, facilities, youth facilities. Fair bit of youth unemployment at the time. The only kind of more national issue at that stage is started getting the very start of the drugs on the streets and crime. It was the very start with local dispensaries being robbed to get a few drugs out of them. I mean, when you think of it now, and you get the halls of stuff that come in and unfortunately around my area and constituency. But at that time, it was very. It was very different. You know, somebody could go in and rob 4 tins of tablets or something. You know, that was the big issue. So I was tough on law and order. I believed that these you know, robberies and house robberies that were starting, and particularly on old people, and particularly people living alone at home. I mean, the national question was always. I mean, the national question was discussed from breakfast, dinner, and tea.
And then suddenly you're right in the throes of a very, very busy political career, and you're married and with kids. How can you balance those things?
Yeah, well, I was elected in 77. My daughters were born 79, 81. I was up to my eyes in the local football club. I was working in the Mater. I loved the Mater. I loved the hospital. I was working for the Sisters of Mercy. And when I was elected, I stayed on working in the Mater because I came in on the Fianna Fáil tide of 77. So I wasn't too sure, you know, what was going to happen. So the Mater allowed me to stay full-time, which was great, which I did until I was made a Minister of State. So it was a hell of a busy period, and life was busy, and I think everything was great until the 3 elections came. The 3 elections in 81, 82.
One after the other.
Yeah, that was a tough period. We had election in summer of 81, spring of 82, autumn of 82. I had a by-election in my constituency. George Colley died tragically. He had a cardiac problem. And so we had a by-election. So, you know, that was a tough period. And financially, it was a crucifying period because you had four elections in a very short period. So I can tell you, that was a rough time.
And Bertie, with that kind of pressure and so much happening, and you, as you say, with a wife and 2 baby girls at home, did you feel pulled?
Yeah,
directions?
I did, and in fact, you make big decisions in your life, And one of the biggest decisions I had made, I was accountant in the matter and I was doing well. And I was good at my job, and I think I was getting on well with the consultants, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. The Mater wanted to build a private hospital, which is the Mater Private Hospital today. I was appointed CEO at 28, at 20,000 and a car.
I know where this is going.
Yeah.
And I had to make the TD salary was 6,901, and I opted for politics. And
Do you regret that?
I think about it. I think about it.
It's hard to balance.
I can't say when you got to teach it that you regret it, but it was a big call.
Well, was that a conversation that had to happen at home?
Yeah, and now in fairness, it was my call, but it was even my mother ducked that. She said, make your own bloody decision.
Yeah.
But it was a big decision. It was a big decision because I was straight into the front bench, and I was elected. You know, I didn't go for the job, but so I stayed, ran the election, got a huge vote in 81 or 82, whenever it was. And then I was onto the front bench, and then I was elected head of the poll for vice president of the party. So there was no way out after that. So from having wondered going into the 81 election, would I be elected? And would I would be in politics, or would I be going back to the Mater? You end up that all of a sudden that's the way life is going to take you.
Yeah.
It took its toll, though, didn't it? I mean, that commitment and that decision eventually.
Yeah. I mean, I ended up separated, but thankfully, you know, I've been close to the kids, close to Miriam, and you know, Annie went with another life, and you know, it didn't kill me, but it was a tough time.
Must have been. I was just thinking last year, 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, which you are one of the principal architects of. Dublin City University awarded you an honorary degree, and I remember Martin and I were at that ceremony, and there were all the children and grandchildren and Aunt Miriam, just to make the point of, you know, how close you have stayed over all these years. Yeah.
I mean, we've had as normal a life as you can have, you know, but it's you know, the kids. I've always stayed close to Georgina and Cecilia, and I would be very close all the way through. I grew up that way. Went out every weekend. You know, probably most of the spare time I had on weekends I spent with them. You know, we knew every restaurant and hotel in town, and so you know, so that's been good. But you know, I can't complain. You make calls and you get on with it, and that's life.
It isn't always that easy to keep the fences mended. We were very struck by the family unity.
Yeah, no, it's a strong. You know, we would still. You know, Miriam went her way with her partner now, Terry. I went my way. A few ups and downs along that too, but anyway. But that's, you know, we've remained friends and very close to the kids.
You've dedicated yourself to a life of service, and all those ups and downs, they probably inform the way you are with other people, which is good.
Yeah, I think so. Like if life was simple or boring, you know, you'd probably have more normality in your life. But when it's up and down, you do. It's not always easy. But you do learn and you do understand. You do understand people far better. You know, I have friends, lots of friends, thankfully, and. You know, black is black, white is white. There's no in between. They don't understand grey. I think, you know, I have a different view. I can understand all kind of complexities and, you know, simple things. Now, sometimes, you know, in your life be grand if it was all great. You know that ad where, you know, the guy with the ballpoint pen and he's planning his speech at his daughter's wedding, and the daughter is 6 months old, and you know, so I say it's granted that kind of a life.
Yeah, I know.
I don't fall into that category.
You had great success, political success, and then, you know, when thinking back to you become Taoiseach, you meet up with, at an extraordinary moment in Northern Irish affairs, you meet up with Tony Blair, who's also, like you, very pragmatic and also very focused on getting a result. You're also fortunate to be meeting up with someone like Bill Clinton, who, you know, who wants to help and gives a really great helping hand with George Mitchell. And things, they don't clatter together by coincidence. The Good Friday Agreement doesn't come together by coincidence. But I'm thinking back to that time, which was a time of huge triumph. It's also a time of great tragedy for you, because in the right slap bang in the middle of it, your mommy dies.
Yeah. Like the talks process started really on September 97, and it was roller coaster all the way through. And that was really, you know, people forget now why that was. Tony Blair and I had said, and probably more him than me, that he was going to give this project a year, and that if we were going to get anywhere, we'd get there in a year. Now, it didn't quite work out to implementing it, but he said we'd give it a year. And so we had to get everything kind of done in that year, when was the pressure. And then George Mitchell, when we didn't make good progress, I mean, you can forget now about how bad things were. We got to Christmas and it went badly wrong at Christmas. There was the murder of the Alliance leader in the prison. Then there was Republicans had killed people, the Loyalists had killed people. Then we had to use the football red card to throw people out of the talks. And George Mitchell, I met him recently again. We had a chance of going over this. And he was up with the American ambassador and Jerry Adams, and Reg Empey and myself had a debate with him, fireside chatting. But I talked to him that night, and you know, he got, quite frankly, at this remove, it's fair enough to say it, he got fed up with the whole lot of us. And
That hardly surprises you.
No, but I don't know why he got fed up with me, but anyway.
But didn't he say something about the fact that he had a small child and he'd like to see him graduate from college or something like that?
The child wasn't even born.
Oh, sorry.
He did say that afterwards. He got fed up. He felt that this was a circular debate. And
he was hearing the same old.
And we were going nowhere. And he at that Paddy's Day 98, he told Bill, and then he told the parties, and he told me and Tony that he was out. And it was Heather, his wife, convinced him that if he did it that way, he'd never forgive himself. So she convinced him to come back and set a deadline of Easter. And so he was going to be out as well. So you could say the deadline is what made it, but you know, maybe there's a fair bit of, I think, breaks and luck as well. But it's certainly, you can't debate the same old nonsense forever, and you have to come down and say, well, what is important here, and what are the things we needed? And ultimately, we did that. This was a rough time, and you know, the last week, I was in London for the previous week. Tony Blair was chairing the ASAM, the Asian European Conference. He was in the chair for that period. So right during the whole week, I was back and forward in the morning and at night with him, working on the various papers for the agreement, and we were sending them back to George, and then we were having these endless teleconference calls with George all that week. And that was meant to finish up on the Friday. I was meant to come home. That didn't finish up until the Saturday. And my huge regret in life was that I came back, and I had plenty of them, but I came back on the Saturday evening and was meant to go visit my ma, but I didn't. And she had a heart attack the following morning, so I never really saw her again. So that bugged me forever and a day.
You're not going to lose that. I mean, that's going to stay with you.
No, that'll stay.
You live with it.
That will stay with me, which was just unfortunate. And then again, I actually came back and would have had time to go to the house, and I didn't. I went off to a constituency event.
But if you reverse it and ask what your mum would have wanted you to be doing.
Oh, she would have wanted me to be doing that. She would have been If I had went back that night, she would have quizzed me up and down on Articles 2 and 3. I know that. she had that in her beak.
But then at the end of Holy Week, when you actually came down for your mum's removal, was it, Bertie?
Yeah, we were up and down like a yo-yo. I mean, what happened was it wasn't like, see, people now often ask me why the hell did they go back up that morning? The funeral was on at 12 o'clock. Why didn't you wait till evening? The reason was that when I came out from Reno Church after the removal the previous evening, Paddy Tehan, who was Secretary General of the Department, got on to me and said, listen, this thing is going belly up, and George Mitchell, is panicking, and it's the first time I've seen George Mitchell panic.
And it did look like Trimble was going to walk away.
Yeah, and so he said, you need to ring George, and I rang George Mitchell, and I walked up and down Griffith Avenue, which is a long avenue. So I remember George Mitchell eventually said, after about an hour and a half on the phone, he said, where are you? And I said, Griffith Avenue. He said, that's what you said at the start of the call. And as I was saying, I'm still on it. But anyway, so I had to go back up on the following morning. So I went back up, and I had a meeting with first of all, with Tony Blair, short meeting with Tony Blair. He said, yeah, you're going to have to talk to these guys. You're going to have to talk to the union. So I went in and met Trimble and all the gang, the whole crew, all 20 of them. And assured them where we were going, what I'd do on north-south bodies. And then I had to go meet Sinn Féin and explain to them where I was thinking of moving, because it was no good carrying one if you lost the other. And then I went to the SDLP because I had to keep the nationalist coalition together. And then went back to the funeral. And then we went back to the Skyline Hotel where everyone was gathering. And I didn't even have time to have anything to eat, not that I'm probably worried about that. Shook hands to everybody, was straight back up.
And that was the big night, though.
That was the big night. I also remembered, which I really appreciated that day, when I got back about 4 o'clock or to the talks, all of the cameramen and all of the journalists stood and they put down the cameras, and Eamon O'Malley spoke, and he on behalf of them all, said they sympathise with me and thanked me for coming back. So much so that I don't have one photograph of coming back. But it was nice, very respect. Nice of them to do that. Yeah. It was a very nice gesture, which gave me a lot of respect. Get on with it. So on we went then for the final few days, as you remember, and we got across the line on the Saturday, on the Friday evening. And
that was the beginning, really, of real hope in Northern Ireland, of peace and eventually of prosperity, and more importantly of partnership within the north-south and east-west. Those were really great days. And eventually, of course, Paisley, who was outside that process all the way, the work is done to bring him in. So there's a lot of things to be really very grateful for that you stuck with and you made sure happened. And then you had to face the wrath, if you like, of the electorate with the economic turmoil.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Proudly sponsored by Kildare County Council.
Even on a budget, quality is non-negotiable. That's why Quince is the place to score high-end essentials at 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Get your hands on buttery soft cashmere sweaters from just $60, Italian leather jackets, and so much more. And the best part about Quince, they exclusively partner with factories committed to safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. Elevate your style without the elevated price tag with Quince. Go to quince.com/upgrade for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Yeah, I think we that long period, of the amount of effort that had to go into to the north. After we got the agreement, it took us 9 years of implementing. And I suppose you sometimes look back and say, well, if you weren't spending all that time, were there other things you would have been watching? I don't really think there was, quite frankly. I thought about that up and down. I mean, the only area where we left ourselves exposed, it's a bit funny now, or maybe funny isn't the right word, but now everyone is going bananas because we're not building enough houses on the supply side. I was being hammered because we were building too many. And
all the talk about ghost estates.
Ghost estates, and there's not any of them left. But anyway, they're long gone. But that was the big issue of the time, that we were building too many. But really, what happened? Brian Cowan and myself had recognised that it was time to stop the incentives. It was time to, knuckle down and slow down the house building. So we had made all those decisions. Neither of us were stupid that we didn't realise that's what we had to do. But what happened was, once the subprime mortgage thing in America happened, it happened overnight. And the banks here, who, like, it's the old story, if you have 100 quid and you loan somebody 100 quid and you think they're going to pay it back to you over a few years, and all of a sudden you need it back today. And that's what happened. It just crashed. And our banks unfortunately had totally exposed themselves. And, though we took the hit on the regulation, any honest assessment has to be to say that our central banks as regulators weren't doing much of a good job, in my view. And if somebody had to take the blame, and we took the blame.
Do you look back at that time now, with regret? Are there things that you would have done differently?
I think if there was, if you were to rerun it all again, I think there was a period. Now I was, from my time, say before I was gone, I think we would have probably slowed down the property market and made it less attractive for investment quicker. I think we definitely should have done that if you were rerunning it again. For the time after me, I think there was a period where there was a time before the Europeans came in. I mean, it was a period from 2008 to 2010 where I think the country could have prepared ourselves better, and we wouldn't have had the bailout problems. Now, that might have went, so somebody listened to this and say, well, where would you have gone? Well, you would have went out and tried to get loans somewhere to avoid that. And I think there were places you could have went to. And, I think you could have avoided that sharp decline that happened. Now, on the other side of it is that all the industries that we brought in, the IT companies, the pharmaceutical companies, and a lot of the financial services, the non-banks end, they didn't really have a recession. And that's why we bounced back. And, here in Kildare, you have to say that it would have been far worse if we didn't have the pension reserve fund, which Terry McCreevy had set up, because that allowed us to come out with. So this terrible recession, which was very bad, no run away from that, from 2008, we were coming good again by 2012. So it wasn't horrendous. But I think one point that's lost in, I think one huge mistake that was made, and I did point this out to some of the people in authority after I'd left on deaf ears, but if I made a mistake building 80,000 houses, leaving it go down to 8 was a bigger mistake in my view, when the figure that was there at the time was that we needed 35. And I don't take the view that there was no money to do that. I think what we needed to do was to slow it down to a certain figure. And in lots of ways, we've created the problem of today by going from 80 to 8.
So it's a legacy issue, yeah.
Unfortunately.
And how do you view the situation today, Bertie?
We have a few probably good things and bad things. I mean, one of the real difficulties we have is our population is growing very fast. And very, very fast. And this is creating pressures in education and health and everywhere. It requires, housing. It requires a lot of capital expenditure to deal with those issues. And at the same time, you have to keep, we are, as we were dependent on a lot of the property taxes, now we're dependent on the corporation taxes. So the country has to be careful about those issues. And I think, it's very challenging, and we just have to be very careful. But I suppose the lessons of all the past is that you keep your books tightly balanced. You don't just start getting involved in any irresponsible activities. I'm not saying we are, but we need to be careful.
We'll have a change of government in Britain. We'll have a change of government in, not necessarily a change of government, we'll have a new government in Ireland in the next few months. Not really sure when exactly, but then as time moves on and the agreement on the future of Northern Ireland, the future partition, that is going to become more and more into the frame, do you think, Bertie? Particularly as the demographics of Northern Ireland change quite dramatically.
Yeah, I think, nothing ever stays the same, I suppose, and Northern Ireland in its own way is changing quite rapidly. The figures, the breakdown of it, it's not so clear now that it's nationalist, unionist. It's now you have alliance developing themselves into a sizable party. I think there's certainly a move to the centre. I think the DUP, Sinn Féin have moved, from where they were at one stage. People would have said the extremes into the centre. The recent election, I think, has been great in that most of the debate has been about education and health and infrastructure, and the A45 and all of the things that should be there. Industry in Belfast are making quite a push for themselves now into AI. The universities are going really well. Ulster University now with their new campus, Queen's going from strength to strength. So I think all these things are changing it. And the important things is how that's going to play out. I'd like to see, of course I want to see the institutions up and running and staying up and running. I'd like to see North-South being far stronger. I think North-South has suffered because of all the ups and downs. The kind of activity that I put into North-South when Tim O'Connor was the person that was driving it is not anything like where we are today. So I think that all has to be developed. And East-West, of course, let's be honest, the East-West relationships for the last 8 years has been toxic. Not all the time, most of the time.
A lot of the time.
Yeah, but now
careless even, you would say, on one side.
Yeah, it's just been tragic. But now we've an opportunity. The end of Brexit has given an opportunity for the North to be, part of Europe, to be part of the Irish economy. They have the internal economy. The debate, eventually, there's going to have to be a vote as part of the agreement.
On partition?
On partition. That vote will come whenever it is. My own view that the preparatory work needs to be done. I wish there was more of it done, with the institutions not being up and running. That vote can't take place until there's a blueprint. And that blueprint has to show what this island would look like, how a united Ireland would look, a new Ireland, which I rather use the term, how it could be shaped, how it would evolve, what are the protections for what would then be the minority, the unionist minority, so that we don't get back to a situation that they're treated the way the nationalist majority was treated for half a century. So all these things. So you can't ask people to go out and have that vote if they don't know what they're voting for. Because if you do that with certainty, the vote will fail because people are clever. Irish people North-South are clever. So that work needs to be done. And there's nothing stopping that work being done. I think it needs to be prepared. And I think with Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, and Hilary Benn as Secretary of State, because he's spent a lot of time. I've had many meetings with him in groups that I've been involved in, and He has a good take on the place. I think he's open, he's ready for building up relationships on the east-west as well. So I think that has to happen. And we're probably talking, if you asked me, I used to say in 2020, it'll be this decade. Since it's only starting, I think it's now the next decade.
Yeah.
So I think this huge task, this huge amount of work has to take place, I hope, within the decade. I don't want to be all the time saying it'll be the next decade and then we're losing time. So within the next decade. But that has to happen, and that's going to be trying for everybody, and it's going to be, but listen, we've been having this debate now for 100 years.
There's very few people with your experience, though, of that world, within Northern Ireland, the debates, north-south and then east-west. Looking forward to the next big election after the national elections will be for the presidency, and your name's been thrown into the frame. But would you think that is also that the North will play a role in the if you like the mix in that debate?
There's no doubt. I think the future and how we manage to convince. I mean, for a new Ireland to work, we have to persuade ourselves that it's the right way forward. I think huge amount of polls have been done on this and research, and I think we know the answer to that. People would like to see a new Ireland. You then have to convince at least a decent majority in the north. Now, it's not 50% plus one in my view. It could be, because that would be the agreement, but that wouldn't get us stability. But you have to convince a sizable amount of people in Northern Ireland that
will membership of the European Union matter, the fact that they would get back into the Union?
I think all these things will happen, and hopefully, Keir Starmer, I don't expect the next Labour government to apply an application in, but I do think over the next 5 years, and maybe hopefully 10, I mean, Tories have had 14, so I hope at least Labour get back-to-back periods, and maybe, I wouldn't rule out the Lib Dems becoming a considerable party. Hopefully we get 10 years where this project can be worked and where we get a fair winds to try to make progress. Of course, that doesn't mean the institutions have to stay in place. The institutions have their faults, and they can be dealt with in a review eventually. I don't see a problem with that. But what it is the preparatory work, the persuasion, the convincing, building up our contacts, taking away the threats, dealing with that issue that we haven't quite got right, reconciliation.
Bertie, in your podcast last year, to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, you paid tribute to the role of the Women's Coalition, the wonderful work that women had done in the lead up to the peace process. Do you think that the role of the women will be very important with regard to what we're talking about now, the referendum?
Yeah,
on the
definitely. I mean, as they were pre-98, as they were since then, can I say the work that you did, Mary, as president? I mean, all of this helps to change. Like I'm old enough, and maybe we're all old enough to remember, the perception of the Republic. And I think we've moved a long way. But the question is, this is the question, have we moved far enough to convince a sizable majority of decent people of the non-nationalist tradition in the North that the best way for their future and that of their children and grandchildren is to a new Ireland? That's what I want to achieve. I've spent all my life believing in a united Ireland. The reason I joined Fianna Fáil was the first thing on the card that you got when you were a kid joining was the unification of the country and the restoration of the language, right? And they were the issues. So the question is, have we done that? And I think the challenge and the task now for the next decade, because if it's not done in the next decade, I don't think it'll be done in the decade after. I think it has to be done. You'll get this chance and this opportunity And
what would persuade them? Bertie, there are very few politicians, I can't think of any actually, on the island today who have your experience, the depth of it, the stretch of it, and the success of it in relation to Northern relations. And also, I think it's worth saying, you'd be very well known and very well respected within that unionist community you're talking about. You've talked to them a lot. What do you think? What would be the elements that could persuade them?
I think we have to deal with the issue of reconciliation a bit better. I'm not saying that we haven't done a lot on it, but I think we still have to try and deal with the issues of the past on all sides. But I think we're moving. I'm not saying we haven't solved it, but I think we're moving well on that. And then I think it's basic trust. One of the things I always felt bad about in the North over the years, that 30 years dealing with unionist families, that they'd always said, but they said, Bertie, our kids have to go to universities abroad. And I'd say, well, there's good universities here, there's good universities in the south. And that was kind of ruled out as if, they couldn't trust, they had to get them out of the place, of what might happen. And why were they thinking that? Not just about education, they were thinking of the fear factor, how they might be taken over, how they might be treated. And I do think there's a sizable amount of people, and we're not talking about people we listen to now on the Nolan programme, but, I think there is a sizable amount of people who, if they can feel trust and confidence, and that it is a new beginning and a new way forward, and there's a plan put in front of them, I think they can genuinely be persuaded. There will be an element, who not if the Lord came down and asked them, and it didn't matter what religion the Lord was, he won't convince them. So I think that's that. But I honestly believe, and that there's a huge amount of decent people, of faith and no faith, who are in the North, who can be persuaded on a project once it's properly done, and once we stop talking about, and I don't think there's anyone talking about now, to be fair, once we're not talking about coercion or force or ramming it down their necks. Like we've all matured from, like when I was a 20-year-old, and the time of the Bloody Sunday, and that God knows what I was saying, so we've all moved a long way.
And one of the prices, of course, that people have paid for precisely that outflow of young people from Northern Ireland going to universities in England and Scotland and Wales is 3 out of 4 don't come back. They don't come back. They stay. They marry. They meet their partners. They get jobs. They don't come back. So they're not. Their talents are lost in Northern Ireland in so many ways. And
this is I think a huge tragedy, and I really, because then you're breaking the family unit, in a way. If people voluntarily want to go to Timbuktu, that's great. But if they almost feel compelled that they have to go away, and as you've said, they can't come back, that's the bad bit. That's the bad. Most Irish people from the Republic who, this we're the best place and the greatest in the world for going here, there, and everywhere. But there's always that sense.
You're coming
home. Some do, some don't. But but at least you're coming home. In the North, it was the opposite, and it always struck me dealing with people of the unionist tradition. And then I also think that, quite frankly, I think there are some of the areas of the Troubles, whether they be nationalist, Republican, loyalist, unionist, it doesn't matter what banner you put up, that haven't really got all the benefits of what the project has been since '98. And I think there needs to be an effort, not to say we're going to do this for one, that's the wrong thing to do, but that we can lift those areas out of, and that's better education, that's better apprenticeships, better training. Every time I turn on a programme of any station, north or south, people are short of workers. They want to be trained.
Bertie, you have dedicated your life to politics, and when you were starting off and through your career, who were your political heroes?
Well, I would have been Sean the Mass would have been, like, my dad and ma were deaf, and they were blindly deaf, you know, but I was a Sean the Mass, and when I was in my first office on the 5th floor in Leinster House, I used to take down Dáil Bates and read some of his speeches, and, you know, shortly during lunchtime, you know, he was progressive. He saw the benefit. Like, we believed in the 30s and the 40s that the way of the country progressing was to have trade blockages and barriers and levies and tariffs, and, you know, sure, imagine if you imagine if you had to follow that policy, we'd have no inward investment, we'd have no ICT, all the things that have made Ireland, and it was Lemass that changed internationally. Obviously, Tony Blair and Bill Clinton are big friends of mine, but Mandela would be my Mandela, because I was lucky enough to meet him 3 or 4 times, and to go to the presidency. But listen to his story and read about his story, and see the way he was able to move from A to a Z in a lifetime.
And what was it like meeting him and being with him and discussing with him?
Tremendous, because and of course he would all the time talk about the problems, like probably any politician. If you're being honest, you talk about the problems, and his problem wasn't just South Africa. I mean, he passionately believed in what the continent of Africa, and how that, you know, European model or something like it, or the United States model, could also be into Africa. Now, you know, I wouldn't like to be too optimistic about whether that's all going, because about 6 wars going on there. But he still was the visionary. Here's a guy who spent so many years in jail. He wasn't just thinking of his own place. And hopefully that's making some progress. If the next decade is all about immigration in Europe, well, it's not going to solve itself if we don't help Africa.
Have you concerns about the direction of Europe, and, well, the direction of democracy generally?
Yeah, I mean, the big campaign, the next campaign for the next 20 years is autocracy versus democracy. That is the championship match for the future. We saw Modi moving, anyway, thankfully he's been stopped. We see several African states. We see Erdogan, hopefully he's been stopped in his tracks too. You see the coalition of Iran, China, North Korea, Russia. Yeah. You know, these things worry me greatly, and I think it's you know, we need a strong Europe. I mean, I kind of see the world now like the top 4 or 5 of the Premiership. Back to my football, you know, you have the Americas, you have the Chinese, you have Africa. It's about blocks. You know, the big decisions. Of course, there'll always be domestic decisions. There's local decisions, but the big decisions of the world have to be made in blocks. And like it or like it not, I mean, the reality, if something happens in Outer Mongolia now, you know about it. Both will know about it in about 3 minutes' time. So we're in a world where it's not the isolationism of the past. It's about global thing, and that means you need global groups and global leaders, and you need strong people. And don't ask me the next question. Do I see them?
Well, do you see them though?
I think it's a worry. I think I've seen. I put it diplomatically. I think I've seen better ones in my long life.
When you mention it there, what's your take on social media?
If we could abolish it, it would be a huge help to society. But as we always say, we never would have got a Good Friday Agreement.
It's relentless.
And I probably never would have been elected. But anyway, it's no, I don't. I'm not a fan.
Do you see it as the dangers?
Yeah, there are dangers, and you know, it's a funny thing in this great modern world that if either of you great people invent it, a project, if you've invented a new financial project or a new drug, or if you invented AI, straight away the regulatory bodies in the world would be all over them, and they would work out tight regulations that we'd all have to be governed by.
Control and accountability.
Yeah, but it sounds with social media, now we've had it for 20 years, and I keep on hearing we're going to have, you know, maybe to check the names. Like you can, if you go in to open a bank account in Ireland, you'd be lucky if you can do it in about a month because there's so many rules and regulations. If you want to go on social media and castigate everyone and anyone, you can do it in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes. Yeah. So I don't get that, quite frankly, you know, because like let's just take let's say this top of a bottle was a drug. Like we would go through rightly so, the most stringent regulatory bodies in Ireland, in Europe, in the world. It'd be tested, it'd be trialled, and it'd come someday to the market, right? But somebody in the back garage can think up a new twist on social media, and it seems as if the world is a generation behind it. I don't quite understand that.
Do you think one of the worries could be that it just turns people off getting involved in any form of public life, any form of out there in the public civic life, whether it's politics, whether it's cultural stuff, whether it's pro bono work? It must be very off-putting.
Yeah, well, I think it's I set up, must be 20 years ago, Sean Kelly, who was the former Uachtaráin of Cumann Cascale. I had put him in charge of a body, good 20 years ago now, looking at volunteerism. I remember some people asked me, you know, why was I doing that? There was nothing wrong with it. And I said, well, you have a look at what's happening on the ground. Go check with Vincent de Paul, or go check with volunteers in soccer, rugby, Gaelic, whatever, you know. Look what's happening. And now we see what's happening, and there's a huge, you know, lack of people, and a big part of that is social media. Because if somebody, I had experienced this where on a residence committee, a very good residence committee, I won't mention the area, they really run Christmas well, they run summer well, but they told me this could be the last summer, and I said, why? You run the best committee. They said, because we've only 7 people left running the summer show, and 5 of them are over 80. And I said, well, you know, how about the recruitment? Oh, nobody has an hour to give. And I think this is, and part of that is people don't want to be blasted as somebody down social media and some of this laziness too, let's be honest.
The other thing is that to be part of social media takes time. They give so many hours to... Yeah,
well, anyway, the only social media that I'm on, I check the weather forecast, I check the GAA results, and I check the soccer results, and I look at the news headlines.
Speaking of which, Bertie, the Dubs. Talk to us about your beloved Dubs.
Well, I think the tide is going out on us a bit. We've had a
some of us are hoping.
Yeah, I know.
Some of us live in hope.
We've had a great period, but I always say to people, you know, you've no idea what we suffered from 78 until
the famine
until 2011.
And we're talking 1878 here now.
We went through 30 years of only 2 All-Irelands, even though we were the capital. And the big part of being in Dublin...
my heart is breaking for you.
The big part of being in Dublin is that, you know, a large proportion of people now are not Irish at all, and they're nice people. There's a huge part of them are not from Dublin. There's a huge part of them are anti-Dublin. There's a huge part of them have no interest in JA. We're in a position where we can hardly get 15 guys to turn up.
Oh, Bertie. As Mary said, my heart bleeds for you.
Bleeds for you.
But I have to find
what did you think of your mommy and daddy's native county being beaten by Louth?
I have to say...
Well done to Louth, huh?
I have to... Well, we had a funny situation. I was delighted for the wee county, but we had a funny situation. My mother, because she was from that West Cork, was huge football. My dad was from South East. He was huge hurling. But I was lucky enough that I grew up with a a love for both games. So, but it's listen. What's good about, regardless of All Irelands or hurling All Irelands or that, what is brilliant is to see just a huge amount of young people, boys and girls, involved in hurling, football, ladies football, camogie. It's great to see that.
You've got grandchildren. Are any of them into the GAA?
They're all members of Sylvester's Malahide.
Oh, very good.
One guy is good at soccer as well, but the others are
is
all...
he Nicky's?
Nicky's goalkeeper.
Because Nicky has his background, his pedigree is soccer.
Nicky got to the bench in Leeds United, but never got on. Never got on. Poor Nicky regrets it. Nicky was told he wasn't tall enough. He was almost 6 foot. But his brother, who was a very talented guy in many things, but not goalkeeping, is about 6'6". So anyway, that's how it works. That's how it works.
I know you're still busy and doing loads and loads of things. There was a period when you probably got dog's abuse every time you put your nose out the door. Do you feel that's all behind you now? There's been a kind of is it redemption?
Well, listen, you get I run into the storms at the tribunals, and I had to deal with that for several years, and it was a tough time, and a tough time for Celia Larkin, who was my partner through it, and we got a rough time, and it went back for years and years and years, and both of us had to go through a lot. But anyway, in fairness to her, she battled away and stuck through it with me, and that. But it was a tough and tough period. I feel I was very unfairly treated. I mean, my view is the tribunal had to get a big head after spending donkey's years or whatever. I better not say the number of years, or they'll write me another letter. And I think they just kept after me and chased everything. I mean, I had to produce 30 years of records and answer for everything for 30 years. I thought it was over the top. But anyway, listen, we live in a democracy, and that's the price you pay for it. And maybe it's better than... I can't be giving out about autocracies and then say that I won't live by democracy. So that's how it is.
But do you feel a change in sort of the temper and the mood of the country these days?
Yeah, no, listen...
you're back in the party now.
Yeah, I am. And that's very at local level. I'm not involved in anything national. I'm involved in more things in Northern Ireland than I am with the party. But I never really got abuse from other than a small section of society. And, even though I was gone before the crash started, I think, and all the decisions that happened after I was gone, I was collectively blamed for what was my period and the period afterwards. But listen, that's life, and it was difficult. I mean, I had to deal with those lovely people in the castle for 8 years, and then with the report and all the stuff that came after in the report for another 2 or 3 years. So it was 11 years of my life.
And how do you cope with that personally when you have to deal with it, when you're actually going through it, Bertie? Well,
to be honest, I had to almost just leave it till the weekends because I was so busy during the week. There was no alternative. So I invariably spent Sunday nights kind of trying to dig up records and trying to get people to chase things. And in fairness, I had incredibly good records. And in fact, I often thought if I did what maybe some of the journalists did with the records that they got leaked when they burnt them, they seem to get less hardship than I got for keeping the records.
That's and emotionally for you, feelings.
It was hard. You're dragging yourself, your family, and at that stage, as I said, Celia, through this, that, and the other, and you're pulling friends and people up to give evidence that the last place they ever wanted to see was a castle, and I had to meet my office people, Sandra in the office, and the people who worked with me in my private office. They ended up in the tribunal. They had nothing to do with anything, but people are just tormented by it, and of course it filled newspapers for a long time. I think I hold the Guinness Book of Records as a politician worldwide for one particular Sunday newspaper, the amount of times I filled the Sunday newspaper with it.
What about that other big house, Áras an Uachtaráin? And I know that you have been asked about this numerous times, about whether you will or will not run for the presidency. The question I'm going to ask you about that is, are you finding, because that question has been put and because it's out there, do you find when you're out and about that people are taking it for granted that you will have a go, or are encouraging you to think about it?
Well, I give you the honest answer. You would not walk 100 yards on the street where somebody doesn't raise it in one form or another. Now, mostly positive. During the election, I met a few lovely people who had a negative view. And attacks you for. But anyway, it's listens raised all of the time. And I was in Roscommon for a good friend of mine of 50 years for his ordination from All Hallows. He was back in his parish church for his 50th anniversary ordination, and it was the same weekend as the Euro election. So they were nearly opening up a book between me and their local MEP.
Right. So has thrown his hat in the ring, I believe.
Luke,
yes.
And kindly mentioned me. We'll see. There's a few days more water under the bridge and a few more elections before all that will be sorted.
You're not ruling it out?
No, I've never ruled it in or out, and you have to wait and see. But you also have to be realistic. I'm not quite as young or energetic as I was, but you have to see what kind of realistic support have you got, and would you have your party nomination, and what other heavies are in the ring. So there's a whole lot of if I ever ran for it, I'd be running to win, not to make up numbers, and you have to judge all these things.
If you could change one thing, whether in your own life or whether in Ireland or whether in the world, what thing would you most love to be able to change?
Oh, lots of I'm not. I'm definitely not Frank Sinatra. That I'd end up at the end of my life singing it. I did it my way, and regrets I have a few. But then, if a few to mention, I've loads of things that I probably would have. I would have done different, and loads of things I would have liked to do. You get caught up doing one thing, you couldn't do another thing. So there are lots of things. But I mean, in the end of the day, when I come from a family that, my dad, fought the Brits because he believed in a united Ireland. My mother believed in a united Ireland. I joined a political party because it was the number one aim of it, to have a united Ireland. I spent probably most of my political life working, trying to bring peace and stability and to move it forward on. So if there was one thing I could do, I would love to see a new Ireland operate before I pass this world. But whether that happens or not, but at least it's something I'd continue with, in whatever capacity. It's something I continue to work on.
So there we have it, another episode of Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
And we send a big thank you to our producer right here with us, Enda Grace, here at Dundara Television in the heart of beautiful Allenwood.
We also extend our deep gratitude to Anne-Marie Staunton, our researcher, for her invaluable input.
And a very big thank you also to our sponsor, Kildare County Council. Their unwavering support means a lot to us.
Be sure to subscribe to Changing Times on your preferred podcast platform.
And join us next time for our final episode of the season as we continue to delve into the stories and voices that shape us, shape our community, shape our country.
And until then, from all of us here in Allenwood, in lovely County Kildare, slán go fóill.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Proudly sponsored by Kildare County Council.
When you need to work quickly and confidently across different apps and platforms, consistent quality communication is key. Whether you're writing documents, emails, or presentations, you need Grammarly.
It's an AI writing partner that helps you get your work done faster with better writing. It's always there to help because it works where you work, across 500,000 apps and websites, so you can get more done no matter where you're writing. Grammarly is the gold standard of responsible AI, trusted by millions of professionals for 15 years. It gives you personalized writing suggestions based on your audience, goals, and context, plus tone suggestions to help you navigate even the most difficult work conversations. 96% of users agree. Grammarly helps them craft more impactful writing. Sign up and download Grammarly for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. Grammarly. Easier said, done.
Be warned that once you pick up a refreshingly cold drink from McDonald's and people see just how refreshingly cold that drink from McDonald's is, you may create drink envy. Because there are drinks, then there are drinks from McDonald's.
For a morning brew that really creates a stir, get any size iced coffee, including caramel and French vanilla, for just 99 cents before 11 a.m. Price and participation may vary, cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.